Thank you for tuning into the Post-Infantry Life podcast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Post-Infantry Life podcast. Today we're going to be talking about a little bit of a controversial topic, and that is females in the military. That's been a big thing, especially while I was in the Army. Why are they allowed in the military? Things like that. When did it happen? What were the circumstances that allowed it to happen? So that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today, because I'm sure a lot of you have similar questions. Even I had those questions in the beginning. A little bit of a backstory. So while I was going through basic training, I was partially in a female integrated unit. And this was for the 11 Bravo Infantry. And so we did have females training in a combat MOS. And I want to, give a little bit of a story about that. Also explain, the history behind females in the military. So we're going to go ahead and start with that. So, when did females become to be allowed in the military? I've got a little bit of a note sheet next to me that I'm going to be reading off of. A lot of this comes from uso.org. You can check them out. It's a government-ran website for basically all things military, so feel free to check them out. Anyway. So when did females become allowed in the military is the age-old question. Well, according to USO.org, in 1948, 3 years after the end of World War II, President Harry S. Truman signed the Women's Armed Forces Integration Act into law, officially allowing women to serve as full permanent members of all branches of the armed forces. Then I added a little bit of a side note here. Before that, they were just nurses, cooks, laundresses, etc. And I will talk about that in the next point on the why. However, this was not a guarantee of equal opportunity. The act actually restricted the number of women who could serve to only 2% of each branch, and also limited how many women could become officers. That's not the case today. Additionally, female service members could be automatically discharged if they became pregnant, also not the case today, and they were unable to command men or serve in combat positions, also not the case today. So, regardless of the obstacles that remained in female service members' paths, the Women's Armed Forces Integration Act was still a step toward progress for women in the military. After 1 month after the act passing, President Truman issued the Integration of the Armed Forces Executive Order, desegregating the military and ensuring that black women could serve equally in all branches of the military as well. And this is still happening today. This is a prevalent thing. I almost said prevalent issue, but it is not an issue by any means. Don't get me wrong. So let's see. So the why. Let me expand this a little bit. Okay. So why are females allowed in the military? Shortly after the establishment of the Continental Army on June 14, 1775, Major General Horatio Gates reported to Commander-in-Chief George Washington that the sick suffered much for want of good female nurses. General Washington then asked Congress for a matron to supervise the nurses, bedding, etc., and for nurses, quote, to attend to the sick and obey the matron's orders, end quote. A plan was submitted to the Second Continental Congress that provided one nurse for every 10 patients and provided that, quote, that a matron be allotted to every 100 sick or wounded, end quote. So, the main reason that females became allowed in the military was because there was guys, and I could see exactly where they're coming from. There was a lot of guys, that were being treated by men, which is no issue. We have male doctors today, but they would much rather prefer female doctors because females offer a different sort of care than males do. And that's true. It's kind of like the mother aspect, in a sense, is that, I'm sure if you were sick in bed, you would much rather have your mom, tending to you rather than your dad, just because, your mom just historically seems to be a little bit more gentle, a little bit more understanding, and more caring, regardless of the fact that she carried you for 9 months. There's a bond that grows there. And there's actually a little bit of science fact that I actually found out the other day. So whenever a female gets injured, it actually extracts blood cells from the womb, from the baby, and other cells that then basically rush to that injured area to speed up the healing process, to keep the mother healthy throughout the pregnancy. So basically, while you're nurturing and caring for this child that's inside of your stomach, that child, that fetus, is also caring for you in a sense. Just that was a cool little piece of information I found out the other day, and that explains a lot, besides the fact that you were carried for 9 months in your mother's womb, also that bond that grows through the pregnancy. And those cells never leave the woman's body. After you're born, all those cells that her body used, they stay there forever. They're constantly circulating in her bloodstream. And vice versa. If something happens inside the womb, the mother's cells will go into the baby, regardless of the cells that are already in the baby from, being made. So those things just never leave your body. And I guess it's just a neurological thing that the mother just is always more caring. And so I get that, why they would want, female doctors, that these soldiers would want female doctors rather than male doctors. Because I can tell you for 100% fact, I would much rather have a female doctor. After dealing with the male doctors in the Army, female doctors is the way to go. Trust me on that. That sounds bad, but nothing bad happened. Anywho, so after these females, had been mistresses, and, they were caring for the sick, they were doing the laundry, doing the dishes, the normal, household stuff. It was almost kind of like they were their maids, basically, and they didn't wear the uniform either. They just wore regular civilian clothes, but they still had to abide by the military's rules of conduct, basically. The same rules that you follow today, or at least they would be similar, the same rules you have to follow today under UCMJ, the Uniform Code of Military Justice. It's the exact same that they had to follow, just in two different uniforms. The males had to wear their uniform, but the females only wore civilian clothes. Which, when I was in the Army, if I could wear civilian clothes to work every day, trust me, I probably would have stayed. But I digress. So, and then after a while, like I was saying, after a while with them being, caring for the soldiers and things like that, they were actually allowed to fight alongside their husbands in war. Or not necessarily in war, but in combat. So, the, Commander-in-Chief, George Washington, kind of saw that and thought, hey, these people can do just the same thing that the males can do, only it's better. Not that they're performing better, but it helps the morale of these soldiers, because now they're not away from their families. They've got a female around them, and it helps. So part of my training, I was with an all-male company, and the longing for just a female, nothing specific, but just the longing for a female in our lives was so strong with 200 guys, and that can get pretty not fun, but it just seemed like every time we saw a female, it was like foreign to us. It was almost like seeing an alien just come down out of the sky and poof, it's right there. And being in the female integrated unit, however, a lot of things did happen that shouldn't have happened. But, I mean, you get that when you put males and females together in a training environment where there's high stress. Like, I totally get that aspect. I was not involved in any of that nonsense, but it happens. I've seen it happen. And so, the longing for the female is definitely there. And these soldiers, they had females there. And so I'm sure it took a lot of the stress off of them. And plus, with them fighting alongside of them, a lot of these females were trained in nursing, like the nursing field. And so if a soldier was to get wounded, it's not like today where, everybody is combat lifesaver certified. Actually, not really, hardly anybody was combat lifesaver certified at the time, in 1775, when the Continental Army was established. I'm sure there was a huge lack in nursing skills compared to what we have today. And so with those nurses fighting alongside these guys, rather than just how it is today where they're just kind of in a tent and, we have a casualty collection point, we get all the injured guys there and take them to the tent to get healed. It's not like that. Back then, it was more so they had the nurses, they were out in the field, they were taking care of these guys, and, they were fighting alongside them the whole time. And personally for me, I wouldn't mind that. But now today, pretty much everybody in the entire Army, at least on the enlisted side, for what I know, is Combat Lifesaver certified. And that's just basic, combat care, things like that. Care under fire, like you're taking fire, making sure that person can get to cover, making sure, asking them, can you heal yourself, or not heal yourself, but, can you return fire? Can you move to cover? Things like that. And so I like that they integrated that now today, like most recently. I like that they have integrated that into the military, especially in combat MOSs, because you're not always going to have nurses there, and you're going to need to care for your battle buddy who's fighting alongside you. But, like I was saying, back then it was just the females that knew the nursing stuff. Besides, obviously, I'm sure a guy could go along with the flow and say, hey, follow his instincts and be like, oh, that dude's shot in the arm, he needs a tourniquet probably. And they could bandage that up, tear off their clothing and stuff the wound or whatever. And that's just common sense. Now we've got a little bit more in-depth training and learning on that. And so we actually know how to care for people properly, at least to get them, to the next step and next phase of their care. Whether that's a 9-line medevac, they're getting, carried out in a helicopter, whether they're getting picked up in a medical vehicle, whatever the case. It's good to know those things. And I mean, even in the civilian life, I'm sure it'll transfer over. If I'm, for some reason, end up going downtown somewhere and, someone gets shot or someone gets injured, I'd be able to use that knowledge to at least help them to the best of my ability. Anyway, so back to the point. So with females in the military, a little bit of background on what I think about it. So the main thing that kind of sticks out to me the most is that females in the military are often held to a lower standard physically when it comes to like physical performance requirements, such as the ACFT, which is the Army Combat Fitness Test. They just started implementing that a few years ago, actually, and they moved from the APFT, the Army Physical Fitness Test, the APFT, the Army Physical Fitness Test. They moved from that to the Army Combat Fitness Test because the physical fitness was more so of how many of each repetition can you do for push-ups, sit-ups, and I think it was a 2-mile run. Like how fast can you run and how many push-ups and sit-ups can you do? Well, now with the Army Combat Fitness Test, there's a lot more than what it used to be. Now you've got like a list of exercises. So you've got one is the T push-up. So you're basically going all the way down to the prone position and then extending your arms out in a T and then coming back onto your shoulders and pushing back up. And you do that as many times as you can. You've got the sprint drag carry. So it's like I think it's a 50-meter lane. I'm not exactly certain on that. And it's basically just a dirt path. And what? I don't know. Somebody's texting me, and I forgot to silence my watch, so sorry about the dings in the background. Anywho, so you got the sprint drag carry, which is basically, like I said, 50 meters give or take of a dirt lane, and basically you've got a drag, so you sprint down and back, and then you drag it's got a sled with, I think, 2 45-pound plates, so 90 pounds altogether. You drag that down and back, and then you've got the carry, which is 2 40-pound kettlebells, run all the way down and back. And then after that, you do like a little side shuffle thing all the way down and back. Try to do that as fast as you can. It ruins people, trust me. And then after that, you've got your deadlift, which is a 3 repetition max deadlift. It goes all the way up to 340 pounds, I think. So you do, 3 repetitions of the highest weight you can. And then after that, you move into your leg tucks, which is basically where you're just hanging from a pull-up bar and you're just doing like a crunching motion. So you're bringing your knees up to your chest, basically. And each time you do that is 1 repetition. And the maximum for that is 20, I believe. Some people I've seen that can't even do 1, and I think a lot of that is just more core strength than upper body strength. But if you can pull yourself a little bit to get that extra inch to get your knees to touch, that's good too. It's a little bit of a cheat, but it still counts. And then that's whenever after that, you move into your 2-mile run as fast as you can. And I think the fastest time you get to max it out is 13 minutes and 30 seconds. So it's a nice little high intensity exercise for sure. But it's fun. I mean, it hurts. It definitely hurts. It takes the wind out of you, but it's a good time. So, take the ACFT, for example, when it comes to like the difference in the physical performance requirements. Like females, don't have to do as many repetitions. They don't have to get as low of a time, or as fast, than the males do. And that's just how it is. The male and female requirements are much different. And that's not to say that a female can't still perform, just as well or even better than some males can. I even knew of females that did better on the ACFT than I did. And I mean, that was hard to beat at the time when I was in basic training, because the highest you can get is a 600, and I consistently scored anywhere from 550 to 570 on each ACFT, and I took 3 of them. And that's in the top 2% of ACFT scores for the entire Army. So the only problem I really have with that is that the lower standard is the one that the Army enforces, because they have the no soldier left behind mentality. So men are mostly held to the female standard because of that. And I don't have a problem with that personally. No, I don't. However, people get too comfortable not having to perform up to the male standard, and because of that, they stop caring about their bodies. That's why we see such a dramatic decrease in overall performance for the ACFT, is because guys think to themselves, well, I know there's a male standard, but there's also an infantry standard too. And that's the one that I had to perform on. Regardless of whether or not you're a female, it's the same for the infantry standard, which is what I like. That's the point I'm getting to. But the males tend to get too comfortable with being held to a lower standard, and therefore they don't perform as well. They don't try as hard because they're just trying to skate by. And then that's whenever you see all these, enlisted men that are looking super overweight with their dad bods, because what they do is they'll go the entire period with no practice, nothing for the ACFT, and then they hear from their commander or their platoon leader or platoon sergeant that, hey, we got an ACFT coming up next week, and then they're all rushing around like, holy crap, 1, I gotta lose weight, 2, I gotta meet the standard. And then they do their ACFT, they score really crappy, and then they just fall right back into the same thing, is they're just going back to crappy diets, not exercising, and things like that. So that's the problem I have, is with the people that don't hold themselves to a high enough standard. But props to the females for blowing it out of the water pretty much every time, because they actually work their butts off because they feel like they have something to prove. I talked to a female actually when I was in training, and I just kind of asked, like, what made you want to join the Army? Specifically, a combat MOS. Like, you're joining the infantry, you know what you're getting into, right? And she just told me that a lot of females that she had talked to feel like they have something to prove. And to an extent, that's true, because females haven't been in the military forever. As a matter of fact, they just started doing the integrated training. Like, you've got Camp Pendleton, or over in San Diego, at MCRD San Diego, just, what was it, maybe a year and a half ago, they just allowed the first female class to attend at MCRD San Diego, which, historically that was an all-male training facility, and all the females went to Paris Island, along with some of the males, but now the females are moving over to San Diego, and they're allowed to go to San Diego now, which is good. I think, that there's no issue with that. But when it comes to the female integrated units, that's a bit of a controversial thing for me, just because being in an integrated unit, a lot of the females that I was with were very, they weren't motivated, but they were just like skating by. I'd seen a lot of them, get pushed through just because of the numbers. Like, we had one female who was on a profile, which basically means she had some sort of physical restriction, basically from red phase all the way to the end of basic training in blue phase, which was about 6 weeks long that she was on this profile. And so she wasn't performing any of the ability group runs. She wasn't, doing any of the PT with us. Barely completed most of the training. And then at the end for the Forge, which is the culminating event, we had a 10-mile ruck march, and she didn't complete that. Well, depending on who you talk to, there's only certain things that are actual graduation requirements in basic training. Well, the 10-mile ruck march is one of those things. And because she didn't complete it, they didn't want to just fail her. They didn't want to recycle her or kick her out. So they decided that she was just going to make it up on a track. Now, the issue is there was also a few other females that did not complete it. Which, side note, all the males completed it. Not that that matters. But there was a few females that didn't complete it. And, so they got the opportunity to go to the track and make it up. Well, 03:30 on a Wednesday morning, all the females that didn't pass, they had their rucks, they went down to the track. The rucks were not checked. So, personally, I, checked a couple just to see, like, hey, they're probably going to sham out on this. Like, I'm sure they're not going to pack their full packing list for this ruck march, because they couldn't do it the first time. So, what difference does it make 1 week later? And so a lot of them, just packed like a sleeping system, basically to make it look like they had stuff in there, but it wasn't everything that they were supposed to have. And so they took the females down to the track. There was about 3 or 4 of them. Set a timer for, I believe it was 3 hours, and basically whatever distance they walked in 3 hours is what counted as their 10-mile ruck march. So we had one girl that did about 5.5 miles in 3 hours, and then we had another one, the one that was on profile. She did it in, I think she did 7-ish miles in 3 hours. And, then shortly after that, she got off profile and was able to graduate with us. And now she's, out at her duty station. So just little things like that is kind of what irritated me the most, is seeing them get pushed through, but the males not so much. And they also had a big thing with SHARP, which is sexual harassment and rape prevention. And that a lot of females kind of use that as a weapon in basic training, because I don't know if it's just because they get bored or what, but with an integrated unit, it's really easy to slip up and, say something you probably shouldn't have said, or, things like that, because your hormones, your testosterone is always just through the roof because you're always stressed out. And, we had a few occasions where, we did have a SHARP incident. Even me personally, I had a scenario where I basically got unwanted physical attention from a female, and so I reported it. Most guys probably wouldn't report that because that's kind of all they think about while they're there, but I wasn't there for that. I did not want it at all, and I was not about that, so I reported it, and that female is no longer in the Army. So if you're in the Army and plan to have any sort of, interaction with another soldier, first of all, make sure there's consent involved to the farthest extent, because you could even have text messages that prove that it was consented, but, she could just easily delete those messages. I've seen it happen, and depending on your investigator, if they really want to get into it, they can get those messages back and, actually view them. But if it was up to me, I'd say write it, type it up on your computer, print that sucker out, and have her sign it. Both of you sign it, because then there is no way around it. But that's only if you want to, indulge in those activities. You don't have to. But So yeah, with the female integrated units, there was a lot of just things I didn't really like. And even besides that, I had female drill sergeants who were not combat MOSs that were, teaching an infantry basic training, or infantry AIT even. And that just kind of stuck out to me, like, why would I have a non-combat MOS soldier teaching me how to do my job as an infantryman if they've never been an infantryman? They don't even know what it's like. We had one drill sergeant who was a combat medic, or she still is, I would assume, and we were doing our urban operations, which is like clearing buildings and things like that, and she had to read the notes off of her phone, off the internet, because she didn't know, how to teach the urban operations. She didn't know how to teach setting up security in a building, and so she had to look it up on her phone, which, I mean, I guess I can trust that, it's coming from a credible source, maybe. Maybe it's coming from a credible source, but the fact that I'm not getting a first-hand experience teacher teaching me, hey, this is how this is done, you're most likely going to see this happen, these are some ways around it, I didn't get that. I just got according to this website, it says you should do this. And, that doesn't really mean a whole lot whenever you're getting ready to basically go to war. And you can't just pull out your phone and be like, so how do I do that again? And start scrolling, and you're like, oh yeah, that's right. That bullet point right there tells me exactly how I'm supposed to set up security in a building with 8 windows on the first floor. You just don't know those things. You have to learn them from first-hand experience. People that are teaching you that have experienced those things, because there's 1,000,001 scenarios and 1,000,001 different ways to set up security, especially in a building with 8 windows on the first floor. Like a church building, if you're posted up in a church building on the first floor in like the auditorium area where you got all the pews, there's windows all the way down that thing. So, and say every one of those windows is busted out. Well, you can't just post up on one, because now you're going to have the window on the other side, and someone could shoot you in the back when you're looking out the other window. So, it's just things like that, your fields of fire, that are important. And, I just didn't get that teaching. So, anyway, yeah, that's pretty much it. It's just, the female integrated unit thing it's a big controversial topic. Some people like it, some people don't. Just for me, I would much rather prefer that the units be separated, just to avoid any, unwanted scenarios or situations, because I think it's important for soldiers to focus on training. Now, with females in the military as a whole, specifically in a combat MOS, I have no problem with that. As a matter of fact, I think it's brave, for them to want to step up and, live up to the standard and do the same thing that the guys are doing. I think that's good, and I have no issue with that. But the female integrated unit thing there's just a lot of room for error when you have that. And for me, that's not really my strong suit. I'm not really a big fan of it. But anyway, guys, that's all I really have for this little session today. I will be posting more in the future. As of right now, I'm working on getting sponsors for my videos, actually. So if you guys have any ideas for videos that you want to see, if you want to be featured on my podcast, or if you want to be a guest, we can arrange that as well. So if that's something that interests you guys, don't hesitate to comment below, or message me personally and let me know that. That would be great. I would love to have guests, just to kind of give the vibe a little more energy. I think it'd be a great time. So anyways, thanks guys for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Make sure to share it with your friends. We're still building this podcast, still getting our name out there, so feel free to share it. But other than that, that's all I have for today, and I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.